Okay, so in this lecture we'll be looking at how the digestive tract goes about doing its movement and also begin the trek of food down the alimentary canal. So here we go. So two kinds of movements of materials through the digestive tract. First, there are the mixing movements. These are in the stomach. These mixing movements look like waves of contractions that mix the stomach food, the food in the stomach, with the digestive juices that are being secreted by the secreting gland cells that line the stomach wall. And because both ends of the stomach are closed while this is happening, we just see these just waves of contractions that pass along or through the muscle of the stomach. Segmentation occurs in the intestine, and this is when, and there's a picture of it in the book on page, let me grab my book here. As always, it would have been smart for me to have my book already open, but let's see. If you turn to page 653, they give you an example or a drawing that tries to make sense of segmentation. So if you imagine, if you're looking in your book on, we're looking at figure 17.4, and we're looking at B here, where we have the tube and the yellow and blue material that's in the tube. So constriction forces the material that's being digested toward each other. So we'll have constriction at the exact same time in two regions of the digestive tract, and that pushes the food in between those two areas that are being constricted toward each other, pushes them together. And then we'll see relaxation in the area where constriction had been, and constriction in the area where the relaxation had been. That pushes those foods apart again. And then with another set of constrictions in the area that we saw constrictions in, in the very top image of the tube. So we just keep alternating constriction, relaxing, constriction, relaxation, and over time that forces the food together and to blend and to mix. And so they're showing in that picture how the two different colors of food, the blue and yellow food, as they are squeezed together and apart, eventually will become blended and to get into one color, one bit of food. So by alternately pushing and then pushing apart, pushing together, pushing apart, we can mix the food very well with the digestive juices that are being produced in the intestine, and that really promotes good digestive action, so good chemical digestion. And also helps to create a little bit more mechanical digestion as everything's being pushed past each other and against the walls of the intestine. So segmentation and then those waves of contractions that we see in the stomach are responsible for mixing food. But there's also propelling movements. These propulsive movement is called peristalsis, and that's when we see a wave of contraction that that alternates between the longitudinal and the circular muscle. So we squeeze with the circular muscle, constrict. The longitudinal muscle will then contract as well. That kind of pulls everything along, or kind of pulls the tube back toward the constriction. Then we see constriction in the area that was pulled back, relaxation behind it in the area that had been constricted, and as that occurs, the food is pushed down just a little bit further along the tract. And so it's this wave of contraction of both the longitudinal muscle and the circular muscle that moves food along the digestive tract. Okay, so propelling movements are peristalsis, and mixing movements of having a closed container that we can slosh the food back and forth in, and then that segmentation kind of behavior of the stomach. Of the intestines. So how do we control the movement of materials through the digestive tract? Again, the muscular layer is under autonomic control, and so with sympathetic stimulation, we see reduction in digestive activity. This would be the fight or flight kind of stimulation, where we're not worried about digesting food because we've got to fight off the evil monster that's chasing us down, wanting to kill us. It slows down, it inhibits the mixing and the propelling movements, and stimulates contraction of sphincters instead. So that also will slow the movement of materials through the alimentary canal, because if all the sphincters of the digestive tract are contracted, then you can't move food past those sphincters. Parasympathetic stimulation, on the other hand, will increase digestive activity. It stimulates both movements of the tract and secretion by all of the cells that are, or the organs, the glands that are producing digestive juices. The innervation for parasympathetic control comes from the vagus nerve for the mouth all the way to the first half or so of the large intestine. The distal portions of the large intestine are innervated directly from the spinal cord rather than by the cranial nerve, the vagus nerve. All right, so now let's start talking about the alimentary canal itself, and we'll start with the mouth. The mouth has two regions inside of it. There's the oral cavity, and that's where the tongue is. It's inside the arc of the teeth is the oral cavity, and the vestibule is the area between the teeth and the cheeks. So if you kind of tuck food into your cheek, or like where somebody might keep chewing tobacco or their dip or whatever, that's the vestibule. It's lined with a moist, non-keratinized, stratified squamous epithelium. So like the skin on the outside of the body, it's stratified, it's squamous, but the cells don't die. Instead, they remain alive and and soft and can keep doing their thing, rather than filling up with the keratin protein and dying. So the job of the mouth is to take in the food and start mechanical digestion through a process known as mastication. Mastication is chewing. Makes me think of the bad old joke, never masticate without your condiments. Maybe I shouldn't have said that on tape, but you probably can work past that one. So mastication is chewing up your food, and we do that with the teeth. We use the tongue to manipulate the food and to push it up against the rough palate, the hard palate at the front of the mouth. And so teeth, tongue, and palate all get involved in this process of mastication. And the role that the mouth plays, as well as mastication, is in producing saliva and mucus that lubricates the food. And there's even some salivary enzymes that begin chemical digestion of carbohydrates. We'll talk about those in just a minute. And then the tongue is there to sense the food, to analyze it, to make sure that it's all okay to eat. And if the food is really bitter or sour, then we can determine, has this food become spoiled? Or if the texture is wrong, if it's really soft and squishy when it should be crisp and firm, then we know, something's wrong with this food. The cheeks are the walls of the mouth. So, and you know what we're talking about there. The lips are formed of skeletal muscle only. The orbicularis. Now I've lost it. Oris, yeah. The orbicularis oris are the skeletal muscles, or one of the sets of skeletal muscles that form the lips. And in the limbs, we see many sensory receptors, lots and lots of blood vessels. That's what gives lips their pinkish, the darker pink color is all the blood vessels that we find in the lips. Very sensitive, also used in sensing the food. The tongue is skeletal muscle. It's covered with a mucous membrane. And on the surface of the tongue, we see rough projections called papillae. So papillae just means bump. And so if this is a papillus, and there's a bunch of these papillae on the tongue. Here's the surface of the tongue. This is all mucous membrane here. Then the taste buds are found here along the edges of the papillae. So I remember growing up believing that the taste buds that I was sensing the flavors of food with, that those taste buds were the papillae, but they're not. They're just the location where the taste buds are found along the edges. The tongue is anchored back to the hyoid bone, deeper in the cervical region. It connects to the floor of the mouth by a membrane, a membranous structure called the lingua, that means tongue. So the lingual frenulum, and if you go look in the mirror and hold your tongue up, and look through, okay, that was me holding my tongue up and then making a noise. Sorry. If you look in the mirror, holding your tongue up, that thing that connects the tongue down to the floor of the mouth, that's the lingual frenulum. The tongue actually, close your mouth and let your tongue relax. It nearly fills up the oral cavity when the mouth is closed. And if you could probe all the way back to the back of the tongue without gagging, you would see that it is covered by, on both right and left side, by two masses of lymphatic tissue called the lingual tonsils. So there's where two of the tonsils are found, that are found in the oropharynx. The palate is the roof of the mouth, the top part of the mouth. If you feel toward the front, anterior, that's the hard palate. It's formed by the palatine bone. Now you see where the name came from, palate, for palatine. And the maxilla has the palatine processes. So palatine bone, the maxilla, those are the two bones. This is a bony process, a marking on the bone. And we use the tongue to force food against the palate while we're chewing. So that's the hard palate that's anterior. The soft palate is posterior, and if you can use your tongue to feel back there or stick a finger in to feel around, it is muscular. And toward the posterior most region of the oral cavity, there's a hanging down structure called the uvula. So the uvula is that thing that dangles in the back of the throat. It actually has a role. When we swallow, it kind of flops up and it seals off the opening up to the nasal passages. And so when we swallow, we can prevent any liquids from being accidentally, pushed up into the nose by the uvula blocking everything. So the back of the back and on the lateral surfaces or sides of the soft palate, we find the palatine or palatine tonsils. And when these become infected and show a lot of inflammation and swelling, we refer to that as tonsillitis. Notice the spelling of tonsillitis, two L's in there, tonsillitis. And then up in the, if we go up above the soft palate, there you can't see them just looking into the mouth. But if you go up above the soft palate, in the posterior wall of the pharynx, you would find the pharyngeal tonsils, also known as the adenoids. The pharynx is the throat. So way at the back of the oral cavity, we see the opening into the pharynx, or the passageway into the pharynx. And that's a two-syllable word, pharynx. and inks. Pharynx. Not, well, I'm not going to say it wrong for you, but try it, practice it on your own, saying both pharynx and the same thing with larynx. It's not a 3-syllable word, just 2 syllables. Larynx. The teeth. The teeth are found in sockets in the portions of both the mandible and the maxilla that are referred to as the alveolar processes. And we produce over the course of our life 2 sets of teeth. They form during development, these 2 sets. And the first set, the primary or the deciduous teeth, they erupt through the gingiva. The gingiva are the gums that are the soft tissue connected, or that wraps around the mandible and the maxilla. So the primary teeth, they begin to erupt somewhere around 6 months. They're usually done by about the time 2 years rolls along, although we continue getting some of the teeth further back as we get older. The secondary, well, no, what am I saying? The ones that we start getting into the back, those are permanent teeth when they start to come pushing in. So there's only 20 deciduous teeth, while 12 more teeth, let's see, that would be 3 each on each jaw, 3 on each side of each jaw. Additional ones erupt. They start coming through somewhere around 6 years of age, and they're usually finished as adolescence is finishing as well. The 4 wisdom teeth, though, they are the ones that take the longest to come through. They're the 3rd molars, and they erupt somewhere between ages 17 and 20. So that's the 4th set of wisdom teeth that come in. I'm sorry, the 4th set of molars. So how do we name these teeth? Well, if we start right in the front center, the 2 middle teeth, so right and the left, are the central incisors. And they, because they have that thin blade-like edge, they are used to cut or to bite things, larger, small pieces off of a larger piece of food. The next teeth on either side of the 2 central incisors are the lateral incisors, also responsible for cutting and biting. Then come the canines, or sometimes called the cuspids. And these don't have a real chewing or biting and ripping kind of function, although they can do some of that. Instead, they're useful for being able to kind of grasp a hold of the food in between the 2 canines, so that you can do the biting and the grinding that the incisors provide and that the molars and premolars provide. Okay, so make your way past the canines, the dog teeth, and then you find yourself at the 1st and 2nd bicuspid, or 1st and 2nd premolar. Bicuspid because they have 2 raised ridge surface, 2 teeth surfaces, and their job is to do a little bit of grinding to get the food into smaller particles. And then we start counting backward. 1st, 2nd, and 3rd molars. Where did I get the idea of it? Yeah. I'm sorry, the wisdom teeth are not. Yeah, they're the third molar. I'm sorry, I saw 4 back here. Okay, let's get this back together again. Then 1st and 2nd premolars are the 2 bicuspids, and then we have 3 molars, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd molars. The 3rd molar, that 3rd set, is what we call the wisdom teeth, the ones that come out between the ages 17 and 20. And their job is all about grinding. So they chew, they rub the food in between the big flat surfaces of the molars and just grind away. The wisdom teeth are a little bit of a problem. I know my oldest daughter, she's getting close to having hers needing to come out because we got small mouths in my, believe it or not, in my family. These wisdom teeth can get wedged into the jaw and become impacted, become unable to erupt, and then they really can mess up the alignment of the rest of the teeth in the mouth. So just evolutionarily, our lower jaws, or our jaws, lower and upper, have evolved in a direction that makes the jaw shorter. So if you look at other primates and skulls of ancestral groups to modern humans, you would see much longer jaws in those ancestral groups. And so as we've evolved a shorter jaw, there just isn't sufficient room for this third set of molars to fit in as they start to come out, somewhere around age 17. So when we look at a tooth structure, and here's where one of the pictures that I want you to learn the names for comes into play, page 657. There are, these are the parts of the tooth. There's the crown. This is the part that extends beyond the gingiva. And it's covered up with a smooth, white, very hard surface called enamel, which is primarily calcium and phosphorus salts. And then deep within that enamel layer, we see dentin and also a little bit of the pulp cavity associated with the central portions of the teeth. So we have the crown, and then there is the root. The root is the portion of the tooth that is buried down in the alveolar process, down in the bone, and it is bound to the bone by the periodontal ligament, the gymphosis, if you remember that term. A gymphosis is a type of joint. It's a suture, it's a I can't remember the class. It's gone. Fibrous, there we are. It's a fibrous joint. So a gymphosis is the actual name for the type of joint that we see here with the periodontal ligament. The central part of the tooth is composed of dentin. It's a living tissue. The enamel is non-living. It's cellular. And it surrounds the central cavity called the pulp cavity, and that's filled with a loose connective tissue, and blood vessels and nerves are all in there. So the dentin is the living portion that helps to reinforce the enamel by secreting these calcium and phosphorus salts, and it's well supplied with a blood vessel for getting all nutrients all up into the dentin. And it also provides a pathway for nerves, and that's part of why the teeth become so sensitive when a cavity penetrates the enamel and then starts to erode away or to digest away at the dentin as well, until finally the nerve gets exposed. Okay, so a crown, a root with the pulp cavity and dentin inside the central portions of the tooth. Okay, so let's move on now to talk about the first, some more of the accessory structures, and so we'll talk that are found in association with the mouth. Those are the salivary glands. Salivary glands secrete a watery fluid that helps to moisten and bind the food together. It begins chemical digestion, and it dissolves food molecules into that watery fluid, allowing for taste reception to occur there at the taste buds. So we can't taste anything unless it is dissolved in a watery fluid first. Inside the saliva, we find water, of course. There's also an enzyme called salivary amylase, and it's the job of salivary amylase to find carbohydrates, long-chained carbohydrates like starches, and to insert themselves and break apart the individual monosaccharides, the subunits that carbohydrates are built of. And so we produce simple sugars from carbohydrates using salivary amylase. And it's the serous cells that are part of the salivary glands that produce the salivary amylase. So anytime you see amyl, that relates to carb digestion. And this ase suffix here means that it is an enzyme. So many of the enzymes end in an ase. The other material that is put into this saliva is a relatively thick mucus that if there's a bunch of it, when it hydrates, then it makes a very thick, sticky material. And so the value of having mucus secretions in the mouth is that it helps to lubricate the food so that it slides down a little easier, and it helps to stick the mass of food all together. So mucus is all about lubricating and binding food. So we have three pairs of salivary glands. There's the parotid salivary glands. These are found anterior to and slightly inferior to each ear. And we see primarily serous glands in the parotid salivary glands. And so they produce a really thin, non-sticky, generally watery saliva. The submandibular glands, these are found right inside the lower jaw, down at the floor of the mouth, just below the mandibles, hence the name submandibular. And they have an equal number of serous glands and mucus glands, and so they produce thicker secretions because there's so much mucus involved in it. And then there are these sublingual salivary glands. The sublingual salivary glands are the ones that are found right at the floor of the mouth, right where the tongue connects back to the mouth floor. And they primarily produce a mucus secretion, very little serous glands making salivary amylase in the sublingual salivary glands. And so there's so much mucus in them that it produces a thick, kind of stringy secretion that, that again helps to lubricate and moisten the food. Then there are some smaller salivary glands. We've got minor salivary glands, and they're found just throughout the mucosa of the tongue, the palate, and the cheeks. So some other sources of saliva as well. So how do we control salivary secretion? Well, with sympathetic stimulation, we get a little bit of very viscous, mucusy kind of saliva. So sympathetic, remember that's fight or flight. We're not going to get a lot of watery, thin secretion to make the mouth real moist. Instead, it's a very dry mouth when we produce sympathetic, or when the mouth receives sympathetic stimulation. Parasympathetic stimulation, on the other hand, causes all of the salivary glands to secrete, and it produces real watery saliva with generally lots of salivary amylase. And it can be reflexive. It doesn't even require food. All you have to do is think about food sometimes, and you can get this kind of stimulation going. Your mouth can start to water. But if you add some other sensations to the thinking about the food, if you if you see a plate of delicious brownies, or if you come into the house on Christmas Day and you can smell the turkey and the stuffing baking away, that will also stimulate parasympathetic nerve responses. Okay, so there we are. Sympathetic stimulation, dry mouth, Imagine yourself with, having to stand up to do a presentation in class. Mouth goes dry. Parasympathetic stimulation, lots and lots of saliva, preparing the body to receive some food. Okay, so we've gotten started down the alimentary canal. We'll continue on when we get to the next of these lectures.